All right, so the question is the 12-day Israel-Iran war has ended. There's been a ceasefire. All sides are claiming victory. Israel is, Iran is, certainly the United States and President Donald Trump are. How has this changed the sort of dynamic of the region as we know it over the last many decades? Are we now moving towards a conclusion of these various wars that we're seeing in the Middle East? It started off in the aftermath of October 7th, 2023, when Israel launched this war on Hamas. Then it spread to southern Lebanon, the war against Hezbollah and the Houthis in the Red Sea and elsewhere, and finally culminating in this 12-day Iran-Israel war. Joining us now is Professor Emeritus of War Studies at King's College London, Sir Lawrence Freedman. Thank you very much, Dr. Freedman, for speaking with us. So President Trump calls it the 12-day war. From your vantage, the way you saw events play out and the war play out between Israel and Iran, and now that it's been a week since it concluded, what is your assessment of what has been achieved in these 12 days? Is it a complete reset in the Middle East as we know it, or is it just a work in progress?
It's a culmination of a lot of trends. Which have been going on, you could argue, since the Iranian Revolution at the start of 1979, when the new clerical regime established itself as opponents of both the United States and Israel. So it's not new, and it may not yet be over. But what has changed, and I think this is not just the last 12 days, but all that has happened since October the 7th, 23, is an axis of resistance, that's their term, that was set up by Iran, has been very badly weakened. Hamas is hanging on in Gaza, but is no longer able to pose a direct military threat to Israel. Hezbollah has been severely weakened and was unable to take any part in the recent exchange of fire, despite the fact that it had almost been developed by Iran as a deterrent to the sort of thing that Israel and the US has just done. Syria, which was bolstered by Iran and Hezbollah and Russia, has now reverted to a pre-Assad time, and the US is making quite an effort to embrace it, the new Syria. And now Iran went through a big conflict with Israel, with thousands of missiles and drones prepared to go, and made limited impact on Israel, while Israel had targets in Iran easily available because air defenses had been destroyed. So it's not the end, because the regime is still in place. Its rhetoric hasn't changed, and it's not even altogether clear that it no longer has much of a nuclear option, but it's certainly been severely weakened.
I do want to know, like you said, the regime is still very much there, but what about the old playbook? And this is what the Ayatollah regime, the playbook that they used were these, terror proxies, as you referred to them, as the axis of resistance. They have been weakened, certainly, but have they been weakened to the point where the old tactics no longer apply?
I think, and if they've got any sense, they'll be rethinking their foreign policy and what they're trying to achieve. And I think there are some elements in the Iranian government that realized this some time ago, which is why they were prepared to engage with the United States. It's just they felt pushed beyond a level which they could go by the American negotiations, and then Israel sort of interrupted them. So I think that there's a lobby in Iran to move in a different direction, but it's not necessarily the dominant one. And it's a question of the whole identity of the regime and its legitimacy. Now, I think there are the big questions, in my view, are how they deal with the domestic pressures building up. And many Iranians see the sort of anti-Zionist campaign as a bit of distraction from their own basic needs. The economy's in a mess. There's substantial discontent. That doesn't mean to say that the regime is on the verge of being overthrown, but there's a lot of big issues that need to be addressed. So I think one of the questions is how much they concentrate on these more domestic concerns and how much they try to revive this sort of aggressive foreign policy and the means to conduct it, which I think they'll find difficult. I mean, they may find it possible to sort of stay in the nuclear game in some way. We just don't know enough, I think, about where that capability was left.
So the feeling in Israel certainly seems to be that it could have gone the whole hog, and that is that it could have gone ahead and brought in some form of regime change, because otherwise the old playbook will still be revived by the Ayatollah regime. And somehow the feeling's also that it was President Trump who took the call and who sort of drew that red line saying, we're not interested in regime change. America doesn't want to get dragged into one of those, again, long-winded wars in the Middle East. And had it not been for that line that he drew, Israel could have actually gone and tried to change the regime of the Ayatollah. Is there any merit in such a feeling?
I think Israel wanted to go on a bit longer. They certainly talked about the desirability of regime change. I don't believe they thought they could achieve it by themselves. I mean, they weakened the regime in a variety of ways, including taking out senior figures, attacking a jail, media, and so on. But I think it was always the case, and I think the Israelis understood that would depend on Iranians, not on Israel. But I think it is the case that Trump, having made his point by attacking sites, nuclear-relevant sites, wanted to call it a day and didn't particularly wait for the damage assessment on Fordo in particular and other enrichment plants to see if it actually had all been successful. So he was in a hurry to bring it to a conclusion, and clearly got angry with Israel when it looked like it was trying to carry on in some way. So he brought it to an end, which is why we're in this situation while the regime is still there, still has options, but it is undoubtedly severely weakened.
But what then is the incentive now for Iran to stop the pursuit of a nuclear weapon or to stop enriching uranium, provided they do still have the capability to do that? And like I said, and like you said a moment ago, we don't quite know if they still have that ability. But if they do, what's the incentive for them to stop pursuing the nuclear weapon? Because had this been a nuclear-enabled Iran or a nuclear weaponized Iran, this war perhaps would not have happened the way it happened. Would not have happened at all, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the Iranian view. It demonstrates why a nuclear deterrent might be quite a useful thing to have. Although one has to repeat, they've always said they're not after a nuclear weapon. It's never been wholly credible, but it's still their official view. The problem is first, we don't know, but we have to assume that the substantial damage to their program, what might have taken a year, 6 months or whatever, will now take much longer. Secondly, they've clearly been penetrated by Israeli intelligence, and the Israelis seem to have had a pretty good idea about what was going on, and that will continue, though they've arrested a number of people. I doubt if they feel they've got all Israeli agents. So it's not going to be easy for this to be covert, and if it's not covert, then there's a problem of the Israelis or even the Americans coming back for more. So I'm sure they'll be looking at the moment at what they can do. They've got their own damage assessment to do, and they'll be trying to work out their plans. And I'm sure there'll be a lobby for putting it all together again, not least to show the limits of what the Israelis and US achieved. But I don't think it's that straightforward for them.
All right. One final word, and this is a slightly larger question, a more strategic 2030 question, which is, the big great power competition that's going to define the coming few decades is going to be between America and China. I mean, many are calling it the new Cold War, etc. And there is also the view that all of these conflicts, whether it's Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Iran, India, Pakistan, is actually taking away the free world, the liberal worlds, and the current established global world orders, attention, resources, money, and time away from that big competition, which is how do you deal with this question of a rising and a hegemonic China?
Yes, I mean and that's certainly a strongly held view among some in the Trump administration. And why they want ceasefires everywhere is they just want everything to concentrate on dealing with China. Though I think, in Trump's view, dealing with China is more an economic matter than a military matter, which is why all the tariff issues, I think, are in some ways more important, and in fact may end up having more consequences for the international system than some of the military activity. And I think part of it is trying to read what China's about. I mean, I don't think particularly China is hegemonic globally. It's certainly regionally. And
Let's say if it were to attack Taiwan, how would that
yeah, I mean,
play out? Yeah.
Taiwan's the example everybody gives, but you also got the South China Sea and so on. And we spend a lot of time trying to read American intentions and interests in all of this, and you rarely come out with a sense that the Americans would go whole hog for Taiwan. That they might, and
Will they, even under Trump?
It's not clear. I mean, Trump doesn't particularly. I mean, the main interest that Trump sees and other Americans see in Taiwan is the microchip industry, and beyond that, not a lot. So I think there's a lot of uncertainties in this. Where undoubtedly there's big competition between the US and China in all sorts of ways, but it's become a much more complicated competition. Unlike that between the US and the Soviet Union in the old days. The Soviet Union was unimportant to the international economy. China is incredibly important to the international economy. And that's why I think it's in the end, this is a conflict that will be fought out more in that sphere than in the military sphere. Although if it is ever fought out in the military sphere, we really do have a problem.
All right. So Lawrence Freedman, thank you so much for joining us for this fascinating conversation. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Good to talk to you.